Assalamualaikum everyone and good morning. Today we are going to discuss knowledge overview. This World Development Report basically highlights and it proposes that we should look at the problems of development from the perspective, and that perspective is knowledge perspective. And let's look at what is knowledge. Knowledge, they say, is like a light because it is weightless, it is intangible, it can travel all around the world, and it can enlighten lives of people everywhere. But still, beside the power that resides in knowledge, we come across the fact that yet billions of people they are living in the darkness of poverty unnecessarily. And I can give you a very small example of diarrhea. This is a very small ailment, but still it kills millions of children each year. They die because of diarrhea. Why? Because their parents don't have information how to save their lives. They lack that primary education, primary knowledge that how they can save lives of their kids. Now, beside this, if we look ahead, we find that there's a difference between the rich countries and the poor countries. There's a difference between rich people and poor people, and that is not only because of the reason that poor they have less capital. Beside that, they have less knowledge. So knowledge is one of the factors which creates a gap between rich countries and poor countries. And knowledge is often too costly to be created, and that is why most of the knowledge is created by the industrial economies or the advanced economies. So developing countries, they can acquire knowledge from abroad as well as they can create their own knowledge at home. Let's look at the case of Ghana versus Republic of Korea. It is like in 60 years back from now, both the countries they have the same income per capita. But by early 1990s, Korea income per capita was 6 times higher than that of Ghana. And half of the difference is due to Korea's greater success in acquiring and using knowledge. If you get a chance to visit Korea or any Korean cultural website, you'll find that Korea is a country which is using advanced technology. It is so much into producing advanced technology based gadgets, advanced technology based cars. The high tech is basically infused in the lifestyles and in entire infrastructure of Korea. If you get a chance to go into a cafe, they started this green cafes, and in those green cafes, the walls of the cafe were like the screen of your uh, desktop or the screen of your computer, and they keeps on changing the way the screen backgrounds changes in your computer. Same goes in their cafes, and their tabletops are like they are basically touch screens. The tabletops are like you can log on to computer into that, and they are like touch screen tabletops. So it's such an advanced country. They have world's best transportation system, fastest trains, and the technology is infused everywhere. Even the kids, those who are going in school, they are basically very much into artificial intelligence, robotics, animation, graphic designing, 3D designing. Now let's look at the knowledge and economic transaction, how these are basically connected. The knowledge illuminates every economic transaction because if you're more informed, you're going to take much informed decisions, much wiser decisions. Now let's look into it how knowledge illuminates every economic transaction because it helps in revealing preferences, it gives clarity to exchanges, and it's informing markets. And definitely, if it is opposite, if there is lack of knowledge, what will happen? It will cause markets to collapse or never to come into being. And some producers began to dilute milk in India. So what happened that when these people they started diluting milk in India, the people those who were not diluting this milk, they felt that they are at a loss, and the Indian consumers they suffered. Why they suffered? Because they don't have those kind of gadgets which can basically help them to monitor that is the milk being diluted or not. So here from this we understand that there's a difference between poor countries and rich countries. And what is that? The poor countries they have less institutions, they have fewer institutions to certify knowledge. So institutions play a vital role in quality control and certifying quality And then beside this, they're saying that poor countries differ from rich countries in terms of enforcing standards and performance. If you look at Pakistan, we know that we have a lot of policy being laid down for enforcing standards, but in actual, nobody implements that. Nobody, our system has so many loopholes, and there is so much corruption and bribe that people, they do whatever they want to do, and the law enforcement agencies, they are unable to force those standards or those performance. And finally, they differ because in gathering and disseminating information needed for business transactions. So, advanced countries, they have more organized institutions, their markets are well informed, the information is updated, it is disseminated to everyone to make informed business transactions. Okay, the example is given here is like credit lenders charge higher interest rates because of difficulty in assessing the creditworthiness of poor borrower. The poor, they're often hurt because of the lack of knowledge about these economic transactions. And these money lender in villages, they charge as high as 80% interest rate on the loan that they're giving to these poor. And this is only because they're unable to assess their credit worthiness, and that is the reason that most of these development programs or these projects, they fail. The This World Development Report, it highlights that we should look at the development problems from the perspective of knowledge. And we know that there are many different types of knowledge, but in this report specifically, we'll be talking about two types of knowledge. One is knowledge about technology, which is actually known as the technical knowledge or simply know-how. And we know that the knowledge about nutrition, accountancy, engineering, all these things are basically technical knowledge. And we should understand that the developing countries, they have less of this knowledge, poor, they have less of this technical know-how, whereas the rich countries and the rich people, they have more knowledge, this technical know-how. And we call this unequal distribution across countries and within countries as knowledge gaps. So this gap in knowledge about technical know-how between the people within a country and outside the country, that is known as the knowledge gaps. Now let's look into the other type of knowledge, which is known as the knowledge about attributes, such as the quality of the product, the diligence of the workers, and creditworthiness of the firm. All these things are actually crucial for an effective market. And we have seen that rich countries or industrialized economies or industrial economies, knowledge-based economies, they ensure higher quality of the products, they ensure diligence of the workers and the credit worthiness of the firm. So here what we need to understand that the difficulties that are basically posed by incomplete knowledge of attributes is known as the knowledge problem. So all the problems related to knowledge about attributes, they are titled as the information problems. And there are mechanisms to elevate information problems such as product standards. So countries, they must set product standards. And we've seen many a times the Asian companies or Asian brands, they are unable to make their place in international markets because their products fail at international standards. Those countries, they provide certified trainings to their workers, and they develop these credit reports, and all these things, the product standards, training certificates, and credit reports, they are fewer and weaker in developing countries, whereas they are opposite in advanced economies or advanced countries. They have large product standards, they enforce those product standards, they have certified trainings, and these credit reports, they are much stronger in developed nations. Now let's look into these information problems, which are the problems pertaining to knowledge about attributes. These information problems and the resulting market failures, they especially hurt the poor. And considering development from the knowledge perspective, it reinforced that some well-known lessons that are being learned, such as the value of open trade regime. What happens in open trade regime? Because in open trade regime, there is an open competition, and this open competition basically results into the higher quality of the product and the consumer get benefited. There is more innovation because of the competition. The product quality keeps on improving. So they are saying it should be an open trade regime and of universal basic education, that education must be universally available to everyone, despite what caste, what creed, what gender they belong. Universal basic education should be for everyone. It also focuses our attention on needs that sometimes being overlooked. And here we need to understand like the need for scientific and technical training. It is actually missed in developing nations, and at times local research and development is being neglected, and the critical importance of institutions to facilitate the flow of information essential for effective markets. So the developing nations or the underdeveloped nations, they are unable to realize the importance of these institutions. They need to understand that they have to go for capacity building of these institutions, so that these institutions, they can play their vital role, which is very much required in terms of getting updated information and transmitting that information to the market to make most effective decisions, to help market to grow, and to help market to become an effective market. And then approaching development from the knowledge perspective, it actually requires adopting policies which can increase both type of knowledge. Either it is technical know-how or it is knowledge about attributes. These policies should increase these both types of knowledge, because it will result into improving lives in countless ways besides just higher incomes. Now let's look at the development from the knowledge perspective. We have so many examples. See, if people, they have the information about the nutritional value of food, and they know the type or the category of food and what category of food they should take as an essential part of their meals, like proteins, carbohydrates, and fiber. So they can actually go for a balanced meal which can basically improve their health. And if people, they know the replacements, so they'll be know where to spend money, and they can even have good food in small budgets. If they know that there is a replacement of protein, they should not always go for meat, but they can also have pulses to have proteins. So this knowledge will help them to improve their health and to have a better quality of life. And now knowledge, if people, they have knowledge how this aid is being transmitted, they can actually prevent the transmission of AIDS, and this can basically save life of millions of people and premature deaths. So it public, they also know, they have the information about industrial pollution. They'll stop polluting the environment, and that can lead to a cleaner and more healthful environment. And microcredit programs can make it possible for poor people to invest in better futures for themselves and their children. So these microcredit programs must offer trainings, they must educate the lender, so and they must assist the lender. So lenders, they must be successful in returning the loans in time. And in short, knowledge gives people greater control over their destinies. The twin issues of knowledge gaps and information problems cannot be entangled in real life. To unleash the power of knowledge, governments, they must recognize and respond to both types of problem, often simultaneously. For the sake of clarity, however, we are going to analyze these issues separately, beginning from the knowledge gaps. So let's look how we can go for narrowing knowledge gaps. Here we need to understand that closing knowledge gaps will not be easy, and developing countries are pursuing a moving target as the high income industrial countries constantly push the knowledge frontier outward. So here we need to realize that there are countries which are just into pursuing their moving targets, and they don't have any intention, rather they don't have any resources to go and create knowledge. Whereas high income industrial countries, they are creating knowledge and then they are pushing this knowledge frontier outward. Greater the knowledge gap is the gap in the capacity to create knowledge. So we all of us know that there are only few countries which are creating knowledge in the world, while rest of them are not creating knowledge at all. and there's a difference in some important measures of knowledge creation. They are far greater between rich and poor countries than difference in the income. So we can look at this figure 1, and it is telling us that knowledge creation, that high income economies, they are creating more knowledge, whereas the countries which are poor countries, they are creating less knowledge. We need to realize that the developing countries, they need not to reinvent the wheel or the computer or to go ahead for discovering the treatment for malaria. Rather, all this knowledge is available. The poor countries, they have an option to acquire and adapt much knowledge already available in the richer countries. And here we need to understand that the communication cost is being dropping down, and so transferring knowledge is much cheaper than ever. And in figure 2, let's look at figure 2, and we see that the cost of sending information continues to plummet. So it's been decreasing down. There's a trend of decrease down. And given these advances, the stage appears to be set for rapid narrowing of knowledge gaps and a surge in economic growth and human well-being. So, as we are stating that the cost of communication is being plummeting down, so it means that the transfer of knowledge should be very rapid. But why is it that this transfer is not occurring at a rate at we are expecting it, and what conditions are necessary for developing countries to make fuller use of the global stock of knowledge? These two questions are really very important questions, and this will actually help to understand that what is actually required, why this transfer is not happening at a pace at which it should. And then finally, we should look at why these developing nations are unable to take advantage or capitalize on this global stock of knowledge. What is there that is missing? What conditions are actually necessary to capitalize on this knowledge? Up till yet, we have covered the first part of the report, in which we have discussed the importance of knowledge for development and the risks and opportunities that the information revolution possesses for the developing nations. And now we are going to examine the 3 critical steps that the developing countries must take to narrow these knowledge gaps. The very first step to narrow knowledge gaps is to acquire knowledge. So acquiring knowledge, it involves tapping and adapting knowledge available elsewhere in the world. In this regard, what countries can do that, for example, through an open trade regime and through foreign direct investment and licensing agreements, they can tap into these knowledge, and they can adapt this knowledge, as well as creating knowledge locally through research and development and building on indigenous knowledge. So they can basically adapt knowledge. They can first tap into the knowledge, and then they can adapt those knowledge to their indigenous context. And then second, what they should do for narrowing knowledge gap is to absorb knowledge. So for absorbing knowledge, you cannot absorb knowledge unless and until you create a ground for that. So it involves, for example, ensuring universal basic education, and with special emphasis on extending education to girls and other traditionally disadvantaged groups, creating opportunities for lifelong learning and supporting tertiary education, especially in science and engineering. So here it is that you have to absorb knowledge. You need to build the capacity of people so they are enabled enough to absorb the knowledge that is coming in. And then finally, communicating knowledge. It involves taking advantage of new information and communication technologies through increased competition, private sector provisions, and appropriate regulation, and ensuring that poor they have access. Just as knowledge gaps exist between developing and industrialist nations, so too are there large gaps within the country. So it's not just that there is a difference across countries, but there is difference within the country as well. We have seen that in urban areas and rural areas, there's quite a lot of difference in the technical know-how. So strategies for closing these gaps often include the same elements, and applying them effectively go a long way towards reducing inequality and eliminating poverty. So if we are going to reduce these gaps, we'll be able to reduce inequality and eliminate poverty. But even if knowledge gaps could be closed entirely, with everyone in developing countries enjoying access to the same know how as well as educated people in the industrial economies, developing countries would still be at disadvantage in another aspect, knowledge about attributes. So, knowledge about attributes is equally important as knowledge about technical know-how, because knowledge about attributes is required for every transaction. This requires a variety of market and non-market mechanisms to collect and disseminate information, many of which are weak or lacking in developing countries. Markets, they cannot function properly, they cannot be progressive unless and until they have knowledge about the attributes. And in this regard, government plays a very important role. That governments, they come at front and they develop and establish standards, they develop laws and certifications, and then the market functions better and everybody gets benefited. We have the case of India where we previously have discussed that the milkman, they used to add water to the milk, but when government jumped in and they established the standards, protocols, and the certification, then everything went well. And we need to understand the roles of institutions in addressing the information problems. And when we say this, use this word institution, it means that it includes governments, private organizations, law enforcement agencies, or law abiding agencies, and the social norms of the society. All these things contribute to establish, recognize standards, and enforce contracts, and thus it makes it possible that transactions that would otherwise not occur. One of the major difference between rich countries and poor countries is that rich countries, they have more diverse and more effective institutions, and these institutions address information problems than do poor countries. These institutions actually make it possible for people to engage in economic transactions that improve their lives. For example, buying milk, finding a job, getting an education, obtaining a loan. So these institutions are making things possible for people. They're improving their life by helping them in these tasks. And information problems are often at the core of the difficulties that poor people face in their lives. And these institutions, they actually help people to overcome these problems. Poor people in developing countries encounter these problems in their daily life. Here we need to understand that the developing nations, we cannot eliminate the unequal distribution of information from that. Rather, what is like we can basically improve in parts through institutional innovations which are designed specifically for the developing country settings, and keeping in view the special problems those are confronted by people living in those areas. And now we have to stress upon three areas where these problems are most severe, and by promising some solutions in these three areas, we can basically make a major contribution to achieve sustainable growth that benefits the poor. Now, the first thing that we need to stress upon is the processing the economy's financial information. And here, what particularly needs to be done is to ensure transparency. And transparency can be brought by using effective accounting and disclosure, and by designing regulatory approaches that work in information scarce settings. And then increase our knowledge of the environment. And how we can increase our knowledge of the environment? So this calls upon conducting research to understand the environmental issues, and then disseminate this knowledge to develop environmental policies, and then disseminate this information to people of the country. And then you should give them incentives to be a responsible citizen, to reduce pollution, and to be responsible stewardship. Now, finally, it's about addressing information problems that hurt the poor. And in this regard, we need to understand that taking the time to learn about the needs and concern of these poor people. So, what then, once you understand the needs and concern, after society can then offer them useful information and assist them to uplift their status, and can, if they can assist them in devising ways to reduce their isolation from markets and improve their access to formal institutions. So once you understand what are the problems that these poor people they are facing, so once you understand those problems, you make processes to make things easy for those people so they can basically get connected to the market, they have an access to the market, and they have an access to the formal institutions, and at times even in countries they establish informal institutions to help these poor and help them to become the part effective member of the market. Let's look into the Green Revolution, which is a paradigm of knowledge for development. Here, what we need to understand is like there was a worldwide movement, and everybody was working on agriculture knowledge, and there was a quest for breeding new seeds for enhanced agriculture productivity was undertaken in the early post-war years by the vast array of agents. So, like governments, these non-profit organizations, there were multilateral institutions, private firms, banks, village moneylenders, land-rich farmers, and landless laborers. They were all working deliberately or not to improve the daily bread of rice, maize of people everywhere. And the reason behind all this effort was that the Thomas Malthus he underestimated. He had this notion that the population grows at the geometric mean, whereas the food grows at an arithmetic mean. So he was of the view that the number of people will exceed the amount of food that is required for them to be alive. So it was like population of any country would eventually outstrip its food supply. Now, what happened was actually Green Revolution was an evidence that Thomas Malthus underestimated the power of technical know-how and the technological advancement. He was unable to take them into account while he was predicting that the food will be in scarce quantities. So, what happened that there were advancement in a field of agriculture, in transportation, in canalization that basically transformed food production. And in early 1950s, Asia and South America have both they had the double yields of staple crops, whereas in Africa even it was seeing modesty, but still its yields increases. And here what we need to understand that the global gains in output per hectare has been dramatic, particularly for wheat, maize, and rice. So all around the world, the food was basically being produced in higher quantities. And now we also should look into that the early steps that were taken in the Green Revolution mostly involved narrowing knowledge gaps. And what happened that the first step was to narrow the gap between the scientists, what scientists knew about plant genetics and the widespread ignorance on this score in developing countries. It was reflected in the unavailability there of new crop strains based on this knowledge. So this scope was basically narrowed largely through the research and development efforts of government and non-profit organizations. But why was their action necessary? So there's a question arises: why did not private sector they invested in this? Because the prime reason was that when you are going to improve these strains and you are going to sell these new crop strain seeds to the developing nations, what will happen that next year they will have seed with themselves. So the countries which are basically want to commercialize it would not have a long-term benefit and could not make money that they will be investing in research and development of these kind of product. So these new varieties of seeds were basically the public goods, and governments they basically keep on further improving these seeds, and this basically increased the production of maize and rice in coming years. The second generation seeds they were more suited to the local environment, and the number of new varieties of rice, maize they were basically tremendously increased in 1966 and 1985. Uh, to disseminate this knowledge, the developing countries governments what they did that they established agriculture extension services, and the first main job of the extension agents were basically to contact the farmers and inform them about new seeds and the new techniques. Uh, but what happened that when these extension agents they started interacting with the farmers, it was like a two-way information sharing that started happening. And by listening to farmers and learning from them, these agents not only gained a better understanding of farmers' needs and concern, but beside that, they also sometimes stumbled upon seed varieties and cultivation techniques that the researcher they really missed upon. Now, the flow of information between these agents and the farmers help for further adoption and adaptation of these seeds to the local context. And now we'll look into the information problems. Now, from this point onwards, the information problems they basically came into focus. Now, what we need to understand that initially when this all green revolution was started, there was quite a motivation, and the driving force was basically the creation, dissemination, and adaptation of agriculture know-how. But we need to understand that the potential of these innovation could not be unleashed unless and until millions of farmers would have planted, and the results would have shown the potential of this whole exercise. So there were two things that were of concern, that what assurance did farmers have that these seeds would work, because poor farmers they were unable to take the risk, and why would a farmer risk his livelihood on the say so of an extension agent? And it's not just these two things, but along with that, that these poor they were basically unable to get credit from the money lenders. Now, in this scenario, what happened that the landowners which had, or the farmers which were more educated, they were the first one to try these seeds. And the reason was this, that because these farmers, they had extensive land holdings, and so they could limit their risk by just planting these seeds on a test area. And they could quickly recover the fixed cost of their early adoption by applying what they learned across their large farms. And educated farmers basically they were better equipped to find out the new varieties in the first place, and to learn the changes in cultivation practices needed to make the most of them. So perhaps the most important thing was this, that they were more prosperous farmer, and they had more access to the credit, and they were quite able to basically absorb the risk. And the poor farmers they were unable to borrow, and they lack insurance and or the saving to fall back onto the event of failure. So they could only watch and wait and find the results of what their neighbor farmers they have planted. And eventually, this success of the wealthier neighborhood basically encouraged them to plant seeds as well. Now, these farmers, even if they had small land holdings to be kept or to be pledged as collateral, still they were unable to get the loans because of the weak legal infrastructure. Their land had no title, and the courts were ineffective. And because of all these reasons, they weren't able to get the loans. But now, in today's time, the microcredit schemes they have addressed all these problems. But at the time of Green Revolution, poor farmers, which were basically facing the lack of credit, combined with their scant education and other factors, meant that they were often the last to adopt the new crop strains. And this resulting lag between the introduction of new seeds and the widespread use can be seen in the slow expansion of areas sown with new varieties in those days.